Hello everyone and welcome to Live Without Limits. This week we're thinking about what it means to worship without limits. To worship without limits. One of the reasons we're thinking about that this week is because there's an event happening this Saturday, 3rd of October, which you're all very warmly invited to. It's called Go. It's going to be an amazing evening of music and worship and hearing from God for young people, put on by the diocese. It'll be happening at Rising Brook Church in Stafford, starting at around 7 o'clock this Saturday evening. You do need to buy a ticket if you want to go, and there are details of how you can do that in the link below. That's Go this Saturday, 7 o'clock. Be there, it'll be great. So we're going to be thinking about worshipping without limits. I wonder, when you think about worship, if you think about that kind of event that's happening on Saturday, or big events like Soul Survivor, or great times of singing and praising God at your church with other Christians. Worship is something which is an amazing experience sometimes, isn't it? But worshipping God, it's not necessarily like that. It's not necessarily an event. It's not necessarily even any music at all. It's not necessarily something that's a great experience. In fact, the Bible tells us that the worship God demands is costly and hard and may not look very exciting at all. We're going to read a little bit out of order. We've been sort of working through sections of Matthew's Gospel in order, but I want to go back to a passage really near the beginning of the Gospel. It's a story I'm sure you're all very familiar with. I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 2, and first of all just verses 1 and 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have come to worship him." You see that? The Magi came to worship Jesus. They didn't quite know who he was or where to go, but they'd heard something from God that said you must follow that star to find the one who is the King of the Jews and worship him. For them, it was all about finding the right person to worship. That's why they followed the star. That's why they came to Jerusalem. That's why they went to King Herod and said, "Where is the King of the Jews?" We haven't just come to worship anyone. We've come to worship him. And we've come to worship him even though we had to leave our families and our homes, who must have thought we were mad to follow this star that we didn't really know where it was taking us. And we've been on this journey, and I don't know how long their journey was, but it seems like it was quite a long way. And they were willing to do that so that they could worship Jesus. So that's the first thing. Worship without limits means being prepared to do whatever it takes to worship God. For most of us, I guess it doesn't take very much. Getting out of bed on a Sunday morning, making the effort to buy a ticket and go along to Go, taking time each day to read God's word and worship him. But there are Christians, even now in the world, for whom it is the most costly thing. Do you know, I wonder, that Christians in Syria daren't go to the refugee camps because they are not safe places. Even in the refugee camps, they will be persecuted for their faith. ISIS are crucifying Christians because of their faith, because they dare to worship Jesus as the true and living God. Worship can be costly. Worship can be hard. Are you willing to worship God, whatever it takes? So the Magi find Jesus and they worship him. And I'm just going to read a couple more verses from later on in that chapter. This is verse 9. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. They were overjoyed. They bowed down and worshipped him. It's a humbling thing to worship God. It means bowing down before him. It means admitting that compared to him we're nothing, that he is so much more than us in every way, that he is worth so much more. They were overjoyed to do it. It wasn't a hard thing for them, but nonetheless it was a humbling thing to bow down before this little baby and worship him. When we worship, you see, it's not about us. It's not about our experience. It's not about coming away feeling good, feeling like we've been close to God, feeling like the music was amazing. It's not about us. We worship God by humbling ourselves. We make it all about him. And that means it doesn't really matter if they aren't our favourite songs. It doesn't really matter if there aren't very many other people there. It doesn't really matter if it doesn't feel like a great experience. What matters is that the focus is on God and not ourselves. So don't set limits on the ways in which you can worship God. It doesn't have to be about you and your experience. It only has to be about God, focusing on him and worshipping him. And then finally they give him gifts. They give him gold and frankincense and myrrh. And I think that's an important part of their worship and our worship too. God deserves the best that we can give. And so we worship him by giving the best that we have. The best of our time, the best of our thoughts, the best of our money, the best of our lives. As you think about your life, how can you use it to worship God every day? What can you give? What can you lay down before him and say, take it, you deserve that. You deserve the best from me. So worship God without limits. Go this Saturday. Go and sing God's praise with hundreds of other people. I'm sure it will be amazing. I'm sure God will be honoured and glorified and worshipped there. But don't just worship him on Saturday. Don't just worship him in church on Sunday. Worship him with everything that you have, whatever it costs, every day of your lives.